We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research, and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 8th of August 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up.
In order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas. That's what we want to do.
The Israeli Security Cabinet approves a plan to take control of Gaza City. Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters, including the families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas, saying the expansion of the offensive will endanger those who are still captive. We'll have the latest. Also ahead, a signing ceremony at the White House will mark the end of the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan and the creation of TRIP, the Trump route to peace and prosperity. Plus, Andrew Muller will recap what we learned. We'll hear an update from the world of luxury, and we'll ask, what price a day at the beach? Anita Ryota is here to tell us that we've got to have deep pockets.
Absolutely you do, Emma. It's unfortunately no casual fare these days to hit some Italian beaches, and we'll see exactly which ones.
Thank you very much indeed, Anita. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. Donald Trump has said he is ready to hold talks with Vladimir Putin, despite the Russian leader's refusal to meet Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. There have been large protests in Colombia following the jailing of the former president Alvaro Uribe, and the US has doubled its reward for information leading to the arrest of the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro, up to $50 million. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, the Israeli Security Cabinet has approved a plan to take control of Gaza City. The Prime Minister's office announced that the IDF will prepare to take control of the Strip while providing humanitarian aid to the civilian population outside the combat zones. Well, hundreds of protesters, including the families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas, gathered yesterday evening outside the meeting, saying the expansion of the offensive will endanger their loved ones' lives. Well, Yossi Meckelberg is a senior consulting fellow at Chatham House, and he joins me now. Very good morning. Welcome back, Yossi.
Good morning, Emma.
So if you could just outline what exactly you believe the Israeli government to mean by saying taking control of the Strip while providing humanitarian aid to the civilian population outside the combat zones.
Well, it was a very long night, and when the announcement came around 5 o'clock in the morning, Israel time, the government announced 5 principles, and which include disarming Hamas, the return of all hostages, both the living and the deceased, the militarization of the Gaza Strip, Israeli security control of the Gaza Strip, and then the establishment of alternative civilian government that is not Hamas and not Palestinian Authority. Now, I think we should all be very worried. And, you mentioned the family of the hostages, and some freed hostages demonstrating yesterday or all night. And it's not me or them say, but the IDF chief of staff said in the meeting, apparently, that this is as good as giving up on the hostages, the remaining living hostages, around 20 of them. And if we talk about entering into Gaza City, which is the main part of this operation, the implication as we've seen in the last 22 months, for civilians going to be horrendous. The attempts by Israel to replace organizations like UNRWA and UNICEF and other humanitarian aid by providing aid was a complete disaster, including killing up to 1,000 people while queuing for food. What do we expect if they enter into Gaza City again and again, trying to push and displace hundreds of thousands of people out of it? So that's probably what we are going to see in the next few days. And the world is not stopping it. I think what we see is a much exacerbating humanitarian disaster.
What do you believe is the purpose of this?
And it's a good question, because if the IDF only against it, 600 senior former head of security in Israel from the Mossad, Shabak, the IDF wrote a letter. There are no objective to be achieved anymore in military terms. It's actually they're releasing the hostages, let alone recovering Israel's tainted reputation. It seems also from what we hear, what happened in the cabinet meeting, you have the ultra-nationalist messianic push for even stopping completely the humanitarian aid, occupying Gaza in their mind, in their mind, even rebuilding settlements there. Netanyahu deliberately don't use the word occupation by takeover, but it will end in occupation, and it seems that much of it has to do with maintaining the coalition. Also, maybe Netanyahu thinks because he promises for a very long time that Israel is one step away from total victory, which hasn't happened, and maybe this is throwing the last die. But from what we have seen the last 22 months, Israel will enter deeper and deeper into guerrilla warfare with Hamas, or alternatively, if it managed to achieve any military achievements there or military objectives, it might end in many thousands of Palestinians dead.
Explain to us how this would differ in the wider scheme of things. Anything that sort of exists at the moment. We've had a commentator from the American University of Beirut saying that actually this decision to go in and take over the 25% remaining territory that Israeli forces haven't already gone into, it formalizes a situation on the ground, which is to say that for a very long time now, Israel controls what goes in, what comes out. It controls the borders. It is controlling the delivery of food to people, and it is effectively controlling daily life.
This was right even before the war, because Israel imposed a blockade on Gaza, land, air, and sea, but even more so during the war. So in a way, this is correct. It formalizes, but even exacerbates a very difficult situation already on the ground, because it will take the territory, entering into Gaza. Gaza City, what Israel has done so far, it took a piece of territory, displaced people fighting with Hamas militants, and then most of the time withdrew from this and created also corridor in order to control the movement of people and of goods. Now, when we're talking about takeover, even if they don't use the word occupation, it sounds more and more permanent. So going back to, it's next week, it's exactly 20 years since Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip. It seems that 20 years later, it created something which is more permanent of staying there.
What will happen to Gazans who are already suffering at an astonishing scale?
I mean, this is the big question. These are population that is already starved. Already, 60,000 people, according to the figures by Hamas, were killed. Many injured, maimed. We know that 70% of homes been destroyed. So this would just make it way worse for them. They will be displaced again. Some of them already been displaced 5-6 times. Where there is no mention about this horrific euphemism, humanitarian city, that nothing was human about it, but where are they going to be pushed? And also bear in mind, this is a very hot summer, even hotter than usual. If you don't have any shelter, there is no electricity, no basic needs. This also will increase the suffering, immense suffering of Palestinians there. So, I mean, the message is should go to the international community, do something about it, try to accelerate the negotiation in Doha in order to prevent this from happening.
Does that, I mean, given what's happened over the last, nearly 2 years, Yossin, you talk about go back to Doha and go and negotiate. What came out of Israel last night seemed to be a very strong message that negotiations may lead to one thing, but what Israel wants to do is what is going to happen. And how powerless or how much influence does the international community have on decisions made by the Israeli Security Cabinet and by Benjamin Netanyahu?
So if I really push my optimism to the very edge, I would say that this can be part of the bargaining chip pressure on Hamas to negotiate and to be more flexible in negotiation. But I think this is less likely considering how determined is the cabinet and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think there are two things. First of all, had President Trump really wanted to stop it, he would have stopped it. But it seems that he sent contradictory signals. On the one hand, apparently there was sort of a shouting match between him and Netanyahu recently, when Netanyahu denied starvation in the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, he doesn't say he's quite supporting the occupation of Gaza. Maybe he still think along the horrific lines of building a Riviera there. And I think the rest of the world, let's put it like this, whether it's Europe or the region, I think they're many times underestimate the leverage that they have vis-a-vis Israel. Or if they don't underestimate it, they're just reluctant to use it in order to send a clear message to Israel that what they're going to do is unacceptable.
Yossi Meckelberg, thank you so much for joining me on the line on The Globalist. You're listening to Monocle Radio. It's 10:12 a.m. in Yerevan, 7:12 a.m. here in London. Now, the US President Donald Trump is on course to claim at least one victory in his quest to meet his own Inauguration Day pledge, that of being a peacemaker and unifier. Mr. Trump will host the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan today, as an agreement is reached to end the decades-long feud between the two countries. Well, Richard Geragosian is the director of the Regional Studies Centre and joins me now from Yerevan, the Armenian capital. Very good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning, Emma.
So do we have a peace deal?
No, we do not, I'm afraid. Nevertheless, we do have an important latest step in a momentum toward a post-war peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
So tell us what we do have then. If we don't have what Donald Trump is saying exists, what is in this agreement?
Well, I would be a little bit skeptical in terms of the Trump administration's approach, which sees this meeting as more of a real estate deal than a breakthrough in statesmanship or U.S. leadership. Having said that, the Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders are expected to bring the negotiations over a draft bilateral peace treaty closer to signature. And in a more important development, we are expecting a breakthrough agreement on road and rail connections, the restoration of trade and transport between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And that's the real story here.
And this is very much an American victory here, isn't it?
I would say partially. But just as you've mentioned, the meeting at the White House is as much about President Trump's ego than it is about Armenia and Azerbaijan. Having said that, it is a victory in terms of U.S. interest and engagement in post-war developments in this volatile region, much to the delight of many in the region. This is not involving Russia or Iran, for that matter. So in this sense, yes, a geopolitical victory.
And tell us about TRIP, which is the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. From the outside, dare we venture that the name is rather interesting. What does it involve?
Well, I would say with two observations. One, it involves a U.S. private backing or engagement in the operational security of the road and rail transit, something very welcome. But as the acronym infers, it's easy to trip up in terms of how to ensure lasting and durable peace. In other words, the real missing ingredient here is deterrence, preventing Azerbaijan from yet again launching military operations. And we have outstanding issues, from border demarcation to Armenian prisoners still being held in Azerbaijani prisons. Nevertheless, I do think there's been more American preparation in naming this TRIP acronym rather than doing their homework in terms of what's necessary to ensure lasting peace.
What do you mean by that? I mean, it is a very catchy name. And so what are you suggesting, that actually that they haven't thought this through properly?
Well, I am suggesting that, to be quite honest. And the reason is it's the European Union that has long been engaged in the region. It has been deployed with monitors in Armenia, and it's the EU that's actually much more effective in Western engagement. Whereas the U.S. under the Trump administration, this seems as a rather last-minute reaction to a perception of opportunity. And we are rather skeptical here in the region about the sustainability of U.S. interests in Armenia.
What about the rest of the international community now? Because Russia was once extremely involved in all this. You mentioned also the European Union. They did what they could, or clearly not as much as the United States from what's happening today. But how does the rest of the world now deal with this agreement, or however we wish to describe it, and the international implications?
Well, I think there are two factors at play. First, it's a little premature. It's a little too soon to say. But if we look at the absence of reaction, notably Russia's position, the Iranian president has decided to come to Armenia, what we see is, I'm not sure Russia and Iran, for that matter, take this very seriously. Therefore, the reaction of the Russian president has been rather silent, perhaps related to being distracted by its failed invasion of Ukraine. The second observation, though, is any return to diplomacy by Azerbaijan is a welcome move. But there are still lingering questions about this rather punitive peace. It is still based on the validation of Azerbaijan's use of force, for that matter. But nevertheless, we do see this as a step in the right direction.
Richard Giragosian, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Yerevan. You're listening to The Globalist, still to come.
We learned that Candace Owens had been saying things in public again where people, very much including the Macron's legal team, might be able to hear her.
Andrew Muller fills us in on what we learned. Stay with us.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS House View, you get the big picture in bite-sized articles, delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts, all focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It's 7:18 here in London. No, I'm lying to you. It's 7:19 now, everyone. Let's continue with today's newspapers. Joining me in the studio, Rob Harris, Europe correspondent for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Good morning, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
You're on summer sabbatical now. I didn't know journalists could do that.
I've got a lot of leave before I go home for good. So.
This is it.
Yes,
so we're done.
yes.
So 3.5 years in the UK.
Yeah, that's
How's
right.
it been?
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, incredible. Incredible 3 years.
Been busy.
Plenty of PMs, plenty of wars, and an Olympics, and death of a queen, death of a pope. Couldn't ask for more, really.
You did the lot. Your scorecard is full. Okay, thank you for that, Rob. Tell us what we've got today. No deaths of popes or queens, but certainly there is war and there is scandal.
Well, there is a number of spying stories at the moment, and the one that caught my eye was a story in Le Monde, which is the trial which is beginning in Dresden, which is around this Chinese bribery scandal and spying scandal. This is Zhang Ji, who was a former aide to that rather controversial AfD politician, Maximilian Krah. That trial is starting now. He is charged with passing on information about the AfD to Beijing over a 5-year period, and it's really caused a lot of controversy within the AfD, and they are basically going into PR overdrive and worried about what it may reveal. At the moment, it seems like he's passed on everything from the private lives of the leader, including quite controversially the identity of the sperm donor that Alice Weidel used with her partner, but also there's a lot of shady payments that were made to Krah as well. And of course, you'll remember when this scandal broke a couple of years ago, they were forced to suspend their European election campaign. So the AfD is really worried about where this may lead. Indeed. And the fact that there are... do we know how much information we believe is going to come out in this trial? Because it started earlier this week. No one really knows it at this stage. Now, Krah is scheduled to give evidence later on. The AfD is saying everything that was passed on was basically just made up lies, as they would, I guess. But I guess it really highlights the just the lengths China and Beijing are going to. Even in Australia this week, there was a case revealed a Chinese woman in Canberra was charged under the Foreign Interference Act. She was sent by Beijing to spy on local Buddhists in Australia in a sort of a religious order that's banned in China, but had basically been in Australia for years looking at what's going on. So it goes, I guess it goes to the length of Beijing, the information they want to get. It is quite interesting to know that you do, to have someone with such close connections getting so close within a German political party. Yeah. Well, the guy at the centre of this actually had, I think, German citizenship as well, so he'd been there a long time. So what this trial will reveal will be very fascinating. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Article in the Wall Street Journal now about Alexei Navalny and questions being asked about the circumstances of his death, which we know we will probably never know what happened in that. Yeah, indeed. Look, this is a fascinating one. That it's an excerpt from a book about behind-the-scenes negotiating when it comes to the release of spies and people swapping and political prisoners. And this reveals a project, a secret project, Silver Lake, which involved the filmmaker Odessa Ray, who famously won the Oscar for that documentary on Navalny, and she had set up. She'd gone to great lengths in back channels to meet with people close to Putin to arrange a swap between a rather notorious Russian assassin who is in Germany, in prison in Berlin, and a people swap with Navalny, and Evan Gershkovich was involved as well. And this they'd basically, this story reveals they'd got a huge efforts, even without the White House really knowing how much they'd gone to. They'd been involved in intermediaries. But in the end, they basically blame Joe Biden's mental capacity. They blame Jake Sullivan's, the fact that he had such a big workload. He was dealing with the Ukraine war, with Gaza, and also this highly sensitive negotiation. And they basically say the White House acted too slowly, that they had a deal ready to go, and by the time they were ready to go, Navalny was dead. Now, obviously, there are people that say Putin was never going to release his arch nemesis, and that potentially this unsanctioned effort to try and get the people swap may have triggered his early demise. But it's a fascinating read on just the lengths and the behind-the-scenes negotiation.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there is that big question as to whether Putin would ever have ever let Navalny go, because he was a very effective and very internationally recognised and indeed cherished voice.
Yes, indeed. And this story actually basically says he was the closest figure Russia would ever have to someone like Nelson Mandela in that sense. And the fact that Putin he'd been an Achilles heel of Putin, and he was never going to let it happen. But it's a really interesting. They think they were very close to getting a deal, but they say the White House was too slow.
Rob, an article from Stuff in New Zealand, a complete change of tone now. You're going to give us relationship advice, or rather how to dump someone without them knowing it until the very last minute.
Well, apparently it's a new toxic trend, but
we love a toxic trend.
I have been reading that it's been a trend for a while, but it's got a new name, and the term you've heard of ghosting. This is called Banksying.
Right.
Now, it's called Banksying, obviously after the street artist who has a reputation of being able to, spring up from nowhere, but also has created art that self-destructs. Now, this is basically splitting up with a long-term partner and avoiding communicating their true feelings and going to great lengths to end the relationship mentally in their mind before they even tell their partner. And actually, this happened to someone I know rather well whose partner had set up a whole completely separate life and was ready to depart before they even told their partner. And apparently it's relationship experts have said that this comes from a lack of emotional maturity in modern dating, often exacerbated by dating apps, and it avoids having honest, direct conversations with their partner. And in fact, they choose a passive approach that ultimately causes more pain and confusion for their partner. And
it's obviously a very highly practical way of dumping someone if you just make sure that you don't let go of one, you don't let go of the swing of the trapeze until you've got your hand on the next one. But this idea that it has now been formalised now is a suggestion of what? I mean, you talked about people there, trying to avoid conflicts, trying to be an example of a wider fear of immaturity when it comes to emotions and the ability to talk to your loved one.
Yes. And, I guess it comes basically back from so many people meeting online. They're not having conversations. They're almost more advanced in their relationship by the time they enter it without having the interpersonal skills, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio. That was Rob Harris, who is Europe correspondent for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. What are you writing at the moment? What's up, Rob? What's coming out of Rob's pen?
No, I'm actually finished. So I'm on leave and just enjoying the European summer before I head to Australia.
The man is on holiday, ladies and gentlemen. Rob, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist. Now, here's a quick look at some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today. Donald Trump has said he's ready to hold talks with Vladimir Putin, despite the Russian leader's refusal to meet Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. The Ukrainian president insists he should be involved in any discussions between the US and Russia about the invasion of his country. A face-to-face meeting between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin is due to take place in the next few days. There have been large protests in Colombia following the jailing of the former president Álvaro Uribe. He was sentenced last week to 12 years of house arrest for witness tampering and bribery. And the US has doubled its reward for information leading to the arrest of the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro to $50 million. Washington has accused Maduro of being one of the largest narco traffickers in the world. Maduro has been in power for 12 years and has been accused of using violence to silence his critics. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now let's take a look behind some of the other stories we're following here at Midori House. Our senior news editor Chris Chermak is here to talk about whether Switzerland's international isolation is coming at a price.
Two European countries outside of the European Union have suffered wildly different fates in their tariff negotiations with the Trump administration. The United Kingdom reached a deal with a baseline tariff of 10%, better than the European Union's 15% rate, while Switzerland is among the few nations or major nations without a deal as the tariffs came into effect yesterday. Swiss President Karin Keller-Sutter appeared caught unawares by U.S. President Donald Trump's reported dismissiveness in a phone call last week after Trump announced a 39% rate following the call. She led a delegation to Washington to try to repair the damage, but returned this week with nothing once again to show for it.
Well, it shows that Switzerland doesn't seem to carry very much weight in D.C. at the moment, and Donald Trump and his office don't seem to care too much about, a little country somewhere on another continent. So it just shows the power relationship, I think.
That's Florian Egli, professor of public policy at the Technical University of Munich. Switzerland has rarely made noises about joining the European Union, but in an age of self-interested great power competition, particularly between the United States and China, the Swiss will be thinking about getting closer to a 27-nation bloc that helps even the playing field. An EU-Swiss treaty that resets relations was hammered out late last year and is due for a national referendum. Whatever happens with Trump's tariffs in the coming weeks and months, expect growing support for a treaty and closer relationship with the bureaucratic but reliable European Union. For Monocle, I'm Chris Chermak.
And my thanks to Monocle's senior news editor, Chris Chermak, for that. (14:31 in Beijing, 7:31 a.m. here in London. Now, for some time now, China has secured its almost complete domination of the world's supply chain of so-called rare earth metals. These are the critical minerals used as key components of nearly everything we switch on: smartphones, Bluetooth speakers, computers, television screens. But their use is also widespread in military equipment. And lately, American producers of items such as bullets and projectiles are finding it harder to get hold of the minerals they need to make them. Well, I'm joined now from Singapore by John Emond, who's senior reporter for the Wall Street Journal and who has written about this. Good afternoon, John.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me.
So your article, your excellent article, outlines a big problem for the US military, but just explain to us how it's come about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's come about in a couple of different ways. So the major thing is one you've already emphasized, which is that China in recent years has just totally dominated the periodic table. So you really can just close your eyes and jab at some part of the periodic table, and most likely China dominates that mineral, or especially if it's kind of a strategically important one. So that's just something that's been happening very, very consistently for well over a decade. Now, as tensions with China and the West have gotten worse, especially with the United States, in December, China weaponized this by restricting exports, or banning exports, essentially, of a couple of these critical minerals that are needed for military uses, like antimony and gallium. Tensions continued to get worse once Donald Trump took office. He, threatened very high tariffs on China. One response that China put in after that was specifically targeting some of the so-called rare earth minerals and the magnets that they go into, that are used in a wide range of applications, many of which you've highlighted, but fighter jets, tanks, submarines, and so that made it much more difficult for Western defense manufacturers, and specifically American defense manufacturers, to acquire just a range of minerals that they need. There are sometimes workarounds, but it's tough, and it's been a real issue.
And when you mean a real issue, what exactly is happening to the level and the capacity of production that American arms makers have?
Yeah, it's a great question. So As far as I can tell, as far as we can tell, I mean, this isn't, certain industries, like when China's rare earth ban hit car makers, for example, they start howling, right? They're very public. They've had to shut down factories, right? So that's something, for example, that the American automaker Ford said. Defense manufacturers are not nearly as transparent for a lot of reasons about how their supply chain is being impacted. So we do have to, do a bit more detective work. But we did speak to, for example, a drone parts maker that said that they had to delay production of certain parts for up to 2 months because they couldn't get their rare earths that they needed. We've had there are other defense manufacturers who have spoken about how their stockpiles are dwindling. Now, many of these defense manufacturers do keep stockpiles of minerals, so they wouldn't be immediately hit, and they keep them for this specific for this specific risk that has happened. But these stockpiles are dwindling, and they're dwindling fast, and so companies are increasingly seeking out any type of alternatives. Maybe something will be a little bit less good with different minerals, but maybe it'll be adequate. There are a lot of problems with that. To get something accepted by the U.S. military requires a lot of retesting. The last thing they want is to not be able to fire a missile when it's, for a missile not to go when it's supposed to. So it's not as easy to just sub out parts or elements as you might think it could be. And what we're seeing is just these stockpiles are dwindling. Companies are acknowledging this. And one way to tell is that there are traders, people who do have their own private stockpiles, who sort of cite the prices of these minerals, and they're telling you that their own stockpiles are dwindling, and that they are seeing crazy price spikes for some of these sort of very rare, very niche minerals, some of which people didn't really think about stockpiling. So it's becoming a real headache. And I would say, in addition, my final thing would just be, in addition to actual supply chains shutting down, what you also have is just the price of making military equipment goes up, right? If you imagine that something like samarium, a rare earth that's needed in things like fighter jet engines, if you imagine that the price, somebody was telling me that they were quoted a price 60 times the old price. Again, it's not, you don't need a ton of samarium, but still, if you're getting at that level of multiple, then you're starting to talk about a pretty significant increase in spending by defense makers. So that just means you can buy fewer things with the budget you've been allotted by the government.
Finally, and just briefly on this, the fact is that Beijing's operation of the supply of rare earth metals is something which is very, very important when it comes to it having leverage, both economically and politically, especially when you're dealing with tariffs from the Trump administration.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just an enormous source of leverage. It's not clear to me how much the Trump administration thought about this particular lever that China had before they engaged in this trade war, because it definitely made the United States squeal very quickly. As opposed to, we got sort of used to China responding to U.S. tariffs, especially in the first Trump term, and it often wasn't really too much. It didn't have huge impacts on industry, maybe outside of agriculture or something. But here they kind of went for the throat of U.S. industry, and it worked. And frankly, it's not surprising. Everyone knew that China had this card in its hand. It was generally thought to be a matter of time until when China played it, and they played it, and it was an effective card.
How does this end, John?
It ends with everybody getting together and saying, we misunderstood. We have hashing things out. Actually, that there is a possibility with Trump. He is pretty unpredictable, right? There's a very wide range of outcomes from, frankly, I really hope not, but war on the one hand, to some type of kumbaya moment on the other. I think with Trump, the range of possibilities is just enormous. So it's impossible to predict. But what is clear is that this is going to remain a lever for China for quite some time. These rare earths are very important. There are other critical minerals they also control that they could also conceivably weaponize. They could just move, So That said, though, the United States has been taking real effort to develop its own non-China supply chains for these minerals. They're definitely making headway. This is not an impossible problem to solve. This is not an extremely technically challenging problem to solve. I mean, there are difficulties, but it's not like the U.S. won't be able to figure this out. We are already mining rare earths. We are already processing them. We are already making magnets. Just doing it at the scale required hasn't happened yet. But the U.S. government has been pouring a lot of money into making sure it happens and fast. It probably won't happen quite as fast as they want or need, or to remove this as a lever for China during Trump's term. But there are efforts to try to take this particular issue off the table.
John, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for introducing the concept of Kumbaya with Donald Trump. Thank you so much. A senior reporter for the Wall Street Journal. John is based out of Singapore. You're listening to Monocle Radio. 7:39 here in London. It's just gone actually 8:40 if you're listening in Forte dei Marmi. Now, we are going to go to the beach-ish, but where to exactly is becoming a tougher challenge for those who wish to enjoy a day of far niente in Italy. A list of the country's most expensive lidos, places to spend a day by the sea, has been published. And while there is arguably nothing wrong with spending something on a fun day at the beach, there are wider questions being asked about who owns a seaside. Well, doing a deep dive into this one, no pun intended, Monocle Radio's Anita Riotta, our producer of the Foreign Desk, also Sicilian, 100%.
100%.
I made that mistake a few days ago, ladies and gentlemen, by saying she was only half Sicilian, and I perhaps will live to regret it. Anita, thank you for joining us. Could you just clarify the most important question? Is it Lido or Lido?
Well, you are tearing me between my homeland and my adopted home there, because in Italy we would say Lido. I know the Brits say Lido, but I think blood is thicker than water. We're going to go Lido. Okay,
we have been told she is Sicilian, so we must listen. Right, tell us about these incredible splurges that we are being encouraged to make from the list of expensive beaches. I mean, the Lido does what? Is it a beach club, or is it a private patch of sand?
Well, I think that's actually a great way to get into this, because it used to be just chairs, lounge chairs, the umbrella, maybe there's a bar, but it's, where you get an ice cream and a coffee, nothing too fancy. And now it really has sort of blossomed into, and then you can get a towel service. You could go get lunch somewhere. They might even offer, some places do, that you can they'll bring someone and give you a massage in your lounge chair. It's really sort of blown up what the concept is, but it started quite small.
It did. I mean, this would be local people doing a bit of business in the summer, and then it goes absolutely bananas. And when we mean it's going bananas, I mean, how bananas is this getting?
So you and we could hightail it out of here, fly to Genoa or Florence,
yes,
head to Forte dei Marmi,
yes,
and get a £1,500 per day imperial tent at the Twiga Beach Club.
Okay, I'm well up for an imperial tent. What's in it? What's in my tent?
I mean, for €1,500, they need to give you quite a service. So that includes 4 beds, 4 sun loungers, deck chairs, a table. But I'm not sure that it comes with food and drink. So imagine you've spent all that money on and now Twiga I'm not positive if that's correct.
Okay,
but
we're not going to Forte dei Marmi this afternoon unless we get more stuff in our tent. I think that's what Anita is suggesting.
Yes,
Come on, step up, Twiga. She's got high standards. Where else are we going?
We could head to Costa Smeralda in Sardinia, which is staggeringly gorgeous. And we could get a bed plus sofa package. This one comes with menu credit for €550 a day. That's at Nikki Beach, of course, sort of a renowned beach club organization with pop-ups all over Europe. But this one in Sardinia can run you about 500 euros a day.
Okay, I think I might go for that one. I'm not sure about the tent in Forte dei Marmi, but Sardinia is quite nice,
isn't it?
It does raise a broader question, doesn't it? That who actually owns Italy's coast? Because it seems to be a problem that the Italians have, or a sort of a policy, dare I say, that other countries don't have. You can find a beach in France that's reasonably wonderful and doesn't charge a fortune to let you on it. Same thing in Spain. Same thing in the Adriatic, right around the Adriatic. This is. It's an Italian thing, is basically what I'm trying to say.
It is. And I mean, it's interesting because spending the day at the beach is so ingrained in the Italian summer DNA. You arrive with your whole family, you're packed lunch, you're there 8 hours until someone is, a wrinkled prune and you have to go home. But the idea that you have to go and just to sort of lay out, you have to spend maybe 100 extra pounds or 150 extra pounds or whatever it might be if you're a family of 4, let's say. It's becoming a stranger concept. And I think now there's all these different dynamics at play where a lot of people are upset that there aren't free beaches, just open beaches with no, you just bring your towel. And if you want an umbrella, you bring it yourself. That concept is dwindling. And then it used to be just the beach chair and the umbrella, and that would run you maybe €5. And it's sort of ratcheting up. And, it's pricing out families that just want to spend a day and they're maybe just on holiday or taking a day off or enjoying the summer sun. But it's becoming more and more preventative, I would say.
Quick question. We have a few seconds left to find out that having arrived at either Forte dei Marmi or going off to the Costa Smeralda, what's an ideal day in the Anita Riotta calendar, just to tell everybody what we should all be doing this weekend?
I mean, first of all, if your day starts or includes you being on any beach in Italy, it's already going to be a good one. Yes, I think you can't complain. But I think what's essential is just towel. You bring a little umbrella yourself. You can stick it in the sand, a book, a sandwich that you packed from home. And if you're feeling very fun, you can bring a little rosé, a little something in a cooling pack. But I'm pretty standard fare, I would say.
Quite keeping it very, very simple.
Yeah.
Anita Riotta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
There's a craft to every question, which is why at UBS, we query every aspect of the market, working with specialized experts and award-winning research teams, covering over 3,500 stocks in 50 countries, all delivered in a comprehensive library, answering what you want with what you need. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Time now for a look at the luxury markets, and who better to ask than the exquisite Brenda Toohey, Monocle's luxury markets editor, the woman with a piece of paper stuffed full of excellent bits of information that she's now going to share with us about the luxury market world. Good morning, Brenda. How are we? May I just say you look resplendent in double Italian.
Oh, you're very kind, Emma. I'm really well. Yeah, I'm good.
Good. We've got her up. We've got her into the studio. And it's a good thing to be well rested and well wonderful, and looked after, because tell us about the latest about this foray into property, into residential, into hotels that luxury brands are no stranger to now, are they?
No, I mean, but it just seems to have exploded. I just came back from Dubai where, along Sheikh Zayed Road, there are these huge billboards. Yes, that Sheikh Zayed Road, huge billboards showing us all of the wonderful brand collaborations. I mean, Roberto Cavalli has these wildly theatrical residences you can buy into. Missoni, lots multicolored, a little bit more restrained. Not as restrained, of course, as Armani, that kind of wonderful minimalism in subtle colors and shapes and textures. But they're everywhere. And I think, if you like a brand, if you believe in a brand, you can invest your millions and live in the brand.
It is astonishing, isn't it? Because I was reading about Giorgio Armani the other day, and if you wake up in this amazing Dubai residence, you can go and have jam on your toast, which is Armani jam, and then you go to the Armani Privé nightclub in the evening, and the whole thing. And there is that creation, especially with Armani, given the fact that he's so particular about the brand. I mean, this will be something which is curated to within the last thread. That idea that Armani can create an entire universe, but it has to be from the point of view of someone who does control a brand. I mean, is there a sense that the brand that you experience is actually as beautiful and as right as the brand that you will be wearing?
I think it is absolutely 100%. You know, you walk into any of the Bulgari hotels and they have this, incredible lacquered wood. Think of a wonderful Riva speedboat. It's just everything is done to the nth degree. It has to be. I mean, these are very expensive places, whether you're staying in the wonderful Fendi mini hotel above their shop in the center of Rome, opulence and modern art and fabulous colors and, again, textures. Or, you're staying in one of the many Bulgari hotels around the world. Everything is done perfectly. It really is. And, I suppose these brands, they want to resonate with their clients in an intimate and holistic way. These residences also offer experiential events. You've got your gym, you've got the fragrance and, the common parts. You might have a cinema club. You could have a bar. There are a lot of ways in which to sell these fabulous premises.
And the idea, I think LVMH is doing what it can to move on to the Champs-Elysees, isn't it?
Yes.
With a hotel. This expansion is not showing any sign of slowing down, despite the fact that people are sort of raising eyebrows slightly about the entire luxury market at the moment.
I know, it's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They don't stop. It's wonderful.
But maybe, there are certain places in the world who haven't had their fill of, big hero luxury brands and just desire more and more.
And finally, let's talk about once we're wearing the clothes, we've been in the nightclub, we've eaten the jam, we've done everything, and now we're sending our children to luxury schools as well, which I think the uniform is what we're all focusing on.
Well, the children might be a bit older. Bulgari, they might not need us as much as they did when they were in primary school. This really is wonderful. It's a school for anybody, any school leaver, who can go and study goldsmithing, can study about, making jewelry. It's really important. It's an artisan craft that cannot be lost. It's something that is done by hand. It requires incredible focus and training. So Bulgari have put their money into a school in Valenza, which sits between Turin and Milan. And the first course is going to open in September 2025. It's open to all. I think it's wonderful.
Brenda Tui, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. It's time now for What We Learned. Here's Andrew Muller.
I'm my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa.
We learned this week that our confident prediction of a couple of weeks back to the effect that noted American conservative thinker Candace Owens was pretty much going to write these things for us for the next little while had been proved gloriously correct. We learned, yes, that despite the threat of expensive legal action from the President of France, pundit and dingbat Owens was all in on the theory that the First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron, was in fact born a man, name of Jean-Michel Trogneux, and or is her own brother, or something.
I'm my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa.
Long Gonzo and Oscar there with their 1947 hit I'm My Own Grandpa, also recorded by Ray Stevens, Willie Nelson and the cast of The Muppet Show, among others.
Come on. Just get on with it.
Just trying to broaden horizons, we learned that Candace Owens had been saying things in public again where people, very much including the Macron's legal team, might be able to hear her.
It's plausible that Brigitte Trogneux got sick, that the real Brigitte Trogneux got sick and perhaps had a dying wish to help her brother, Jean-Michel Trogneux, who was living perhaps as Veronique, right?
Right?
Again, we're surmising there's no evidence that Brigitte Trogneux died. There's no evidence of that. But that's what it feels like to me.
Famously, if there's one thing that lawyers for the defendants in a libel suit enjoy as they prepare for court, it's their client cheerfully admitting that there is no evidence for anything they have claimed. We should pace ourselves, however, as Owens is probably not yet done delighting us. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Besides which... we learned that at least one entity is running shorter of cash than even Owens herself may be if President Macron's learned friends somehow convince a judge that a mother of 3 children is in fact a woman. We speak of the Republic of Iraq, officials of which have spent recent days wearily addressing rumours that the contents of the national treasury have been eaten by mice. We initially learned, or at least read reports in vaguely respectable news outlets to the effect that squeaking rodents had inveigled themselves into the pertinent storage facilities and chomped through a quantity of cash equivalent to $47 billion, a tidy old stack, indeed an amount roughly 1/6 of Iraq's GDP. However, we swiftly learned that the only actual source for this story appeared to be basically the internet. But we learned again that in our benighted epoch this will do for the excitable and lack-witted, a cohort sufficiently hefty as to move markets and to therefore flush out exasperated government spokesfolk to deny everything. We learned that the unlucky flunky was Mudha Mohammed Saleh, a financial advisor to Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, who sighed wearily as follows, as will be sighed wearily by Monocle's disconsolate rebuttals desk chief, Fernando Augusto Pacheco.
Such a rumor is economically illogical and unbelievable.
About which we, for one whimsical news monologue, were pretty disappointed as, and here is the real reason we have even included this item at all, we'd already spent most of a day workshopping gags related to the fact that the Iraqi currency is the dinar, which sounds a bit like dinner, and obviously if the mice had eaten same, you can imagine the sweeping vista of possibilities that would have spread before us. But we had also learned of a means by which Iraq might have been able to recover some of the losses. Let's have, by way of appropriate setting, some Danish folk song. Because
at Aalborg Zoo in northern Denmark, the Circle of Life is getting some help by putting pets on the menu.
We learned that, yes, Aalborg Zoo was soliciting unwanted mice, rabbits, chickens, guinea pigs and creatures up to and including smallish horses to serve to the zoo's exhibits. We learned that all pets thus donated would be diligently euthanized before being flung over the fence, and that furthermore some sort of tax break was on offer where the horses were concerned, presumably to entice citizens trying to keep their finances stable, not wishing to be saddled with debt, etc. Sadly, however, the fact that Iraq's money hadn't been eaten by mice after all rather undermined the linking device, so this whole thing has been a total waste of everyone's time. Although, and here possibly is where we turn this thing around, on the subject of total wastes of everyone's time,
young musicians from South Africa and Zimbabwe have broken the world record for the largest marimba ensemble.
Yes, we learned that a new world record had been set for the largest number of marimbas played simultaneously, specifically 1,276, from which we learned that 1,276 marimbas being played at the same time sounds like this. actually pleasingly hypnotic. We learned upon further research that this absolutely belted the previous record for massed marimbas, a relatively wretched 505 assembled by Guatemala in 2021.
Rubbish. Bunch of losers. That's pathetic.
That is so lame.
I'm not
Oh my
impressed.
God, embarrassing.
Nevertheless, challenge accepted. All we need is 1,277 people to bring their marimbas to Midori House, let's say next Thursday at 2.
Please do not actually bring marimbas to Midori House next Thursday at 2, or indeed at any other time.
For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
And my thanks to Andrew Muller for that weekly update. If you enjoyed that, we'll tune in every Friday from 7 a.m. right here on The Globalist for Andrew's latest update. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to our producer Anita Ryota and Ryuma Takahashi. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance from Mariella Bevan. After the headlines, more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London, and The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening and have a great weekend.